Okay, I was asked on one of my later videos, if I want to embody my 10.0 self, do I have to spend like him too? This was asked by Matthew 201, so I appreciate you for asking. Again, if you guys ask any questions, I'm going to respond to them with videos so that you guys can get a clear breakdown. But let's dive into this. So, if I want to embody my 10.0 self, do I have to spend like him too? Now this might be a question that comes up for a lot of you guys. If you've watched any of my content, you understand like, hey, we need to align with the version of myself making the money alongside a funnel and a system, a proven system that actually makes us that money so that that person can withhold that money. You guys might come across this question where, if I want to embody my 10.0 self, do I spend like him too? If I want to be the version of myself making 15K per month, do I go buy a Cartier watch right now? Like, is that what you mean, Noah? Let me explain. So your 10.0 self, what we're doing with this message and what we're doing with this, process is creating a frequency gap. Okay, and I've explained this in a couple other videos, but I want to explain this a little bit more in depth for you guys right here, and especially you, Matthew 201. So your 10.0 self is here, currently experiencing, different actions, behaviors, and thought patterns that your current self is experiencing right now. And your current self, I'm just going to say your C self, okay, is you right now with your actions, your behaviors, and your thought patterns that you have right now. And let me make sure this is focusing. Cool. So when you guys have your current self and you've built your 10.0 self, you know exactly what he looks like, you know how he spends money, you know how much he makes, you know how he lives, you know how he talks to people, you know how he gets respected by other people, and how he doesn't allow people to talk down on him maybe. What this is doing is you're creating a gap here. There is a frequency gap between this frequency, because they're both frequencies, they're both existing simultaneously right now, they're coexisting together somewhere, you're just latched onto this one for some reason, okay? We need to close this gap, and when we close this gap, and what I mean by closing this gap is you meet up in a convergence point, and this convergence point is when your current self begins to embody your 10.0 self at the same time. And that is when you're at the convergence point where you're slowly starting to close this frequency gap. And eventually, even though you're not making 15K per month just yet, you are embodying the version of yourself that is already doing it. And it's not something that you have to force yourself to do. It is something that naturally becomes an automatic behavior because you're rewired to align with this frequency, where then reality will have no choice but to meet you in this convergence point where you will just become your 10.0 self. So, now that you understand that, let me answer your question, Matthew. We'll leave that up actually. So if I want to become my 10.0 self, do I have to spend like him too? That is a phenomenal question. That is a great question. I've asked that to myself as well. So let's dive into that real quick. Your 10.0 self is somebody and a version of you on a frequency that reality is supposed to meet you halfway when you do it correctly. When you truly rewire your subconscious mind, reality will meet you halfway, and you will begin to embody your 10.0 self in this convergence point. You don't want to force reality to meet you in the middle. When you ask me, do I have to spend like him too? You don't want to force your 10.0 self to meet you in the middle by buying a Van Cleef bracelet or buying a Cartier skeleton. You don't want to force yourself to spend like you're making 15K per month when you're spending 2K per month. That is you trying to force reality to make a decision. That is you trying to force reality to sway in your direction, and you can't force reality. We are little pieces of sand on a beach, and we are supposed to use what reality has given us, what God has given us, to our advantage to allow reality to meet us in the middle. Okay? So, on the topic of spending, your 10.0 self, I want you to ask yourself, how does he spend money? Your 10.0 self doesn't spend money recklessly. He doesn't go and buy a Van Cleef bracelet just because he can. He doesn't go buy a Cartier watch just because he can. Maybe he awards himself after he's actually made that income, but he doesn't go spend recklessly. He spends with powerful intention behind each spend, right? Behind every splurge, there is powerful intention. And he spends energetically from a space of abundance and power instead of desperation. When you are asking, and this is nothing against Matthew whatsoever, it's a phenomenal question, but when anytime anybody is asking, do I have to spend like him too? What you are basically telling me, and I've done this for myself too, so I'm not talking to any single person out there, but you're trying to force reality to make a decision, and you're in a scarcity mode. You're essentially in a desperate behavior. You are desperate for making or embodying this version, and you believe that embodying this version means acquiring the materialistic things that he has, when that is completely false. When you spend, you want to spend from an energetic state of power and abundance. Spending money doesn't matter to you anymore because you are embodying your 10.0 self, but he doesn't splurge on stupid items. He spends powerfully with intention towards items that will scale him even further than where he is now. For example, if you ask yourself, what would your 10.0 self spend money on? And it's mentorships, strategies, one-on-one coaching, courses, information, books, then yes, spend from that energetical state of power. And think you're spending strategically for expansion. You are spending strategically for expansion. That pure reason is to expand yourself into a better 10.0 self. But it's only fair if I explain the nuance here, okay? If you are spending to upgrade your environment, maybe if it's an apartment, maybe if it's a new car because you're in a beat down Honda Civic, maybe it's just a new city that's safer, then it can be correct. But if it's coming from a place of trying to fill this gap, if it's coming from a place of, I need to buy this because it will help me act like my 10.0 self and close this gap even further, where you're energetically trying to close the gap by buying a certain thing, then that's where it's completely wrong. That's where you're buying a Van Cleef bracelet to look like you're making 15K per month when you just max out your credit limit to buy a Van Cleef bracelet. So think of it like this. If you're asking yourself, I'm going to buy this because it's going to make me feel abundant, it's misaligned. It's not aligned. But if you're buying something from a place of abundance, then it is aligned. Think of it like that. Okay, so hopefully Matthew 201, this answered your question. Oh shit. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, again, leave them in the comments and I will fully respond to them with an entire YouTube video breaking down the question and breaking down the answer. Matthew 201, if you're watching this video, leave a comment if this answered your question. If you want a more in-depth breakdown, DM me on Instagram and I'll send you a Loom video explaining exactly how I'll do it in my position. But this explained it in depth enough for you to understand, and if you've ever been struggling with this, hopefully this answered your question. But yeah, again, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for a lot more content just like this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.